Hey, what's up guys, this is Vitaly, and today I'm going to talk to you about 15 reasons why I think you should be upgrading to Nikon Zf. Now, one of the obviously very clear reasons is we want to talk about the design and build of this camera. As you can see, this is a fully retro camera, the first Nikon full frame mirrorless camera that's been designed by Nikon. And why it's important to understand this, if you're coming from an era where you used to shoot with retro cameras such as this one, maybe a Sheikah Electra 35 right over here, or maybe you used to shoot with something like a Zenith E right over here, you see how closely these cameras actually resemble Nikon Zf. And you know, initially you think about it, well, Nikon initially came out with Nikon Zf, and it's a crop sensor camera, and it's a great little camera, but a little bit plasticky. It's something that people couldn't really maybe relate back as much as they can now relate to Nikon Zf, because it's quality, it's build, it's not too heavy, but really it's clearly not made out of metal. It's made out of magnesium alloy. It has brass dials, so build of this camera and design of this camera is absolutely beautiful. And again, if you're coming from the retro style era where you used to use cameras like this and you're really kind of reminiscing about that old cameras and how you used to experience really photography, this camera is going to be absolutely for you, and you're not going to regret with all of the tech that I'm going to talk about it moving forward on. Now, one of the things that super encouraging about the Nikon cameras is that now they're clearly giving us the fully articulated screen. And I gotta tell you how helpful this is, especially if you are a vlogger, especially if you like the retro style cameras. And you know, you might have been shooting something like Fuji cameras where they do have the fully articulating screen, but you really wanted to have a full frame camera. Well, Nikon Zf gives you just exactly that, an ability to fully articulate, and it's a beautiful little screen. It's a 3.2 inch size with a 2.1 million dot resolution of the back screen. And I gotta tell you, the beauty and just how quietly it clicks in. Okay, and the design of this little quick camera. And one of the beauty behind this one, if you really want to be able to shoot through the EVF, you can simply close your little screen back here, and it's gonna give you a really beautiful experience. And having this fully articulated screen, if you are a vlogger, if you need the ability to be able to record yourself and be able to simply frame yourself when you're out in the field, having the fully articulated screen is a thing to have. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is having this a 24.5 megapixel sensor now in this camera. It is a backside illuminated sensor. It is not a stack sensor. I have been shooting with Nikon Z6 II for probably over close to 3 years at this point, and this camera, Nikon Zf, has the same sensor as the Nikon Z6 II. And I gotta tell you, I love Z6 II sensor, 24.5 megapixels, because when you're shooting portraits, when you're shooting weddings, and you have so many files to go through, you don't need anything more than that. Now, the beauty about this camera, it is because it's coupled with the X-Speed 7 processor that shares those threads and that fiber from Nikon Z8 and Nikon Z9. So having this sensor in your hand in Nikon Zf, it makes this camera so much more powerful, so much more interesting, so much more exciting to use, and knowing that you're not going to have this humongous files that maybe you would get with Nikon Z8 or Nikon Z9. Another reason why I believe it's worth upgrading to Nikon Zf is its IAF autofocus in photo and video. Now, I've shot a number of different projects already with Nikon Zf, and I gotta tell you, and actually specifically in sports, and having the X-Speed 7 processor that shares the same sensor as the Nikon Z6 II, it really delivers speed and accuracy. And I really, really love and appreciate that function and ability to have amazing autofocus. If you come from an era where you had a difficulty acquiring focus, if you feel like you've been shooting Nikon Z6 or Nikon Z6 II and you've struggled a little bit with an autofocus, well, I gotta tell you, it is significantly more improved in Nikon Zf, and I think partially because it shares the same XP7 processor from Nikon Z8 and Z9. So really upgrading to this camera just for purposes of autofocus, and if you're shooting portraits or you're shooting weddings or you're shooting even sports, yes, sports, I'm going to talk about sports a little bit later on, this camera is fantastic for that specific purpose. And if you're thinking, oh man, I don't get many images in focus because of the IAF, well, I gotta tell you, you'll be pleasantly surprised how amazing this camera is, especially in the low light. And in this video, you can see right now, I was recording this small video very much in the dark, just lit with the fire pit and the fire outside, and you can see how autofocus IAF is being following me, basically the camera in video mode. So yes, I gotta tell you, it is a beautiful IAF, and I can't say good enough things about this camera at this point. Okay, now let's talk about something that this camera has, something that Nikon Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II does not have, is the 3D tracking. Now, as you know, the 3D tracking is present in Nikon Z8 and Nikon Z9. It is great for sports. It is great for following subject outside somewhere. It is even great for street photography. And if you are wanting to use this camera for functions like that, you'll be pleasantly surprised that the 3D tracking in this camera, and I think again, it goes back to that XP7 processor that's able to process all that data in this camera. And it's amazing how much tech is actually packed into this camera. So 3D tracking on Nikon Zf is phenomenal. Now guys, if you made it so far into this video, I want to say thank you, because I want to let you know that there will be reason number 16 why it's worth upgrading to Nikon Zf. Another reason why it's worth upgrading to Nikon Zf is one of these new technological advancements that's not even present in Nikon Z8 and Nikon Z9, and it's called pixel shift. Now, you might have been looking at the medium format camera because you are interested in this 50 megapixel or maybe 100 megapixel camera, such as maybe a Fujifilm. However, you don't need to look any further, because Nikon Zf actually provides you with a 96 megapixel file. The camera actually shoots with 4 frames, 8 frames, 16 frames, and 32 frames. 4 frames and 8 frames still have that 24 megapixel file. However, 16 frames and 32 frames do have a 96 megapixel file. You do want to shoot images either for buildings or landscapes or primarily static objects, and you want to use a tripod for that, because what camera does is you have all those files and then you bring them into the Nikon NX Studio, and the software actually combines all those files in order to generate that 96 megapixel file that has a different extension. It's called .nefx file, and all of the images, when you're using the pixel shift, I actually shot in RAW. So this technology is currently available in Nikon Zf, and that's one of the reasons why it's worth upgrading to Nikon Zf, because of that one technology that might be useful for you. Okay, another thing I want to talk about why it's worth upgrading to Nikon Zf, because it has something what's called a face recognition with manual lenses. And the way it works, typically when you have a full autofocus lens mounted to a camera, the camera quickly detects an eye in the image, and it obviously focuses on the eye. Now, with manual lenses, it's clearly you have to use the focus in order to be able to get to it. However, the algorithm of Nikon ZF and its processor XP7 now allows you to actually detect that there is a person and a human eye in the frame, and you can quickly punch in using the zoom plus button. And what it does, it allows you to quickly zoom in on that person. The person actually does not have to be in the center of the frame. The person can be anywhere within the frame. And as you can see in this video, when I click on the plus button, zoom in, it actually takes me to that section of the camera frame where the person is located. And at that point, I can actually now rack my focus to be able to have a very sharp focus. Yes, utilizing that new function on Nikon ZF, it's very sweet. And again, so far it's not available even in the high-end cameras like Nikon Z8 or Nikon Z9. So that's one of the reasons why it's worth upgrading to Nikon ZF. The next feature that I deeply believe why this camera is going to be so highly sought after is because it has this new function where you can simply switch to the black and white mode. Now, the beauty about the black and white mode is that you can see shadows, you can see shades much easier. You can see how light is falling on the camera. And if you're buying this camera for street photography, you're going to be pleasantly surprised that you don't have to you no longer need to go into your function mode and into your menu and try to look for that black and white function, because all you have to do is quickly switch from the color mode onto the black and white. And it's a great function to have and something that's tactile, something that's easy to and quickly to switch. So I highly recommend Nikon ZF for that function, especially if you're a street photographer and if you like utilizing that function of shooting in black and white. Nikon ZF is a tool of choice. Now, another reason why it's worth upgrading to Nikon ZF, if you come from an era where you used to shoot with Nikon cameras and you know that maybe video functionalities in older Nikon cameras is not as great, but you have all the glass and you like the camera and you like the ergonomics, well, Nikon ZF is also amazing for video. As you know, Nikon Z6 and Z6 II wasn't able to shoot in 10-bit previously. Now, unless you're using like Atomos Ninja 5 external recorder. However, with the Nikon ZF, it can actually shoot in 10-bit H.265 internally. You don't need any additional recording devices attached to the camera. It can shoot in SDR and HLG and analog tones within the camera. So yes, having a 10-bit H.265 internal recording this camera is absolutely amazing. One other reason why it's worth upgrading to Nikon ZF, because this camera can actually shoot in 4K 60. Yes, 60 is in crop mode, but it's okay. Having this in this little body, having this in this ability to record in H.265 in 4K 60 is amazing. Now you can also shoot actually in HD mode for up to 120 frames per second. So really, for most people, like literally 90 to 95% of people who would use this camera, it will be more than enough having the 4K 60, even the crop mode. You can certainly may need to switch lenses if you're using it more professionally, but having in such a small body, such as Nikon ZF, is amazing. Another reason why it's worth upgrading to Nikon ZF. Now, I know that if you are a wedding photographer like myself, if you're using portraits or you simply get paid work and you need to have a dual recording of your images. Now, Nikon ZF actually has two card slots. The first card slot is the SD and the second one is micro SD. Now, one thing that I would say is be able to take a little micro SD card, put it inside and take it out is a little bit challenging. But however, I think most people like myself and others that I know, they will likely use the micro SD card and simply leave it in the camera as basically a duplicate for your files. Now, one of the reasons that I think it's worthwhile upgrading to Nikon ZF because of the batteries. Now, this camera uses what is called EL15C battery, but it's the same shape battery that's actually been used in many Nikon previous models. And you're going back to Nikon D7200, Nikon D500, Nikon D810, D850, Z6, Z7, Z6 II, Z7 II, and having the same battery basically. Now the difference between the battery that comes here with this camera, which is EL15C, and I think of C as C for charging. Now the previous models will not be able to charge in camera because it needs to be a function of actual battery, but you can actually use those previous batteries in this camera. So if you are moving over, if you're transitioning into mirrorless, and maybe Nikon ZF is your first mirrorless cameras, well, let me assure you of this, you can actually bring all your previous batteries into this camera and you don't have to buy any more. Another reason to upgrade to Nikon ZF, and let me go back to the video topic that I talked about. Now, ZF actually has the same recording limit, just like Nikon Z8 and Nikon Z9, which is 125 minutes. Yes, I don't know why there's such a wild number, such an odd number to have only 125 minutes, but it's 2 hours and 5 minutes. But I have to tell you, for most people like you and I, somebody who records videos maybe of their kids, or somebody who is even doing some little concert of their children somewhere, or somebody who is doing even recording a sporting event, with Nikon ZF you can do that as well. 125 minutes recording internally is super easy. Now Nikon Z6, Nikon Z7 does not have that function. And again, if you're coming from the older cameras and you're looking to upgrade to something that has a fully articulated screen, that has a 10-bit 4K recording, 4K 60, and also unlimited recording time, and I would say 2 hours is plenty for most of us, you'll be pleasantly surprised to have that function. Now, another reason why it's worthwhile upgrading to Nikon ZF is because of its ability to have interchangeable lenses, okay, interchangeable mount. And you can go for something like, currently I have a 28mm 2.8 SE lens attached. It's a beautiful retro style lens, right? Now, you can go for something 50mm f1.8, and I think this is probably one of the biggest lenses that I would want to go for this camera, especially if I would like to be able to carry this camera with me somewhere for street photography. However, this camera is not limited by small lenses. You can also go for something like the 85mm f1.8. You can go 85mm 1.2. You can go for the newly announced 135mm 1.8 planar lens. You can go for something even larger like this. And actually, I shot with this lens and this camera last weekend sports, and I gotta tell you, it performed extremely well. I shot in 3D tracking. It did an amazing job. So again, having the ability of use all these lenses on your camera, it gives you so much more power in this little tiny retro style camera. So if you're looking to carry over your lenses, even if you're looking to use your older Nikon F lenses, you can do that as well. Now, one of the beauty, and I talked about earlier, when you want to use the manual lenses such as this one, you can simply take it from the older camera, and you can take your little mount that you would need to have in order to attach this camera. And now you can actually attach this manual lens onto Nikon ZF and use that as well. If you love this retro style, if you like this older lenses that have a lot of character in them, you can use this with Nikon ZF. So many reasons to upgrade, and I'm not even done. Number 15 that I want to talk about, the reason why it's worth upgrading to Nikon ZF, it's because of its in-body 5-axis sensor. Its shift vibration reduction compensates for up to 8 stops of camera shake, when paired with Z-mount lenses.
This particular clip here is all about video right now, and you can see I am recording with Nikon Zf and 28mm f2.8 SE lens, and it does an amazing job not only tracking my eye and keeping me fully in focus, but also its stabilization is amazing. I mean, you guys be the judge whether stabilization is good here or not, but this is what it looks like when you actually walk with the camera and you try to record, and I think it does a very, very good job overall.
Additionally, the camera also works with adapted f-mount lenses when using an FTZ adapter, where you get a 3-axis stabilization. So having the 8 stops of camera shake that can be compensated in Nikon Zf, it's not even available in its older brothers of Z8 and Z9, but you do have this available in Nikon Zf. That's one of the reasons, again, to upgrade to Nikon Zf. And for those who've been waiting for quite a while, here's a number 16 reason why I think it's worthwhile upgrading to this camera. It's because of its camera accessories. You cannot use the camera accessories with every camera, but Nikon Zf actually gives you a plenty of different options. One of them is, it's nice to be able to have this soft shutter release button where you can simply attach different kind of button to the camera, and it's simply, there's a little screw up in here, and if you're looking to accessorize your camera, here is a little tiny button, okay, and you can simply screw this in and you are all set. And now it actually makes your retro style camera look even more retro. Now, another accessory that I think is nice to have, and it's not a necessity, but if you have a larger hands like mine, I did purchase this little small rig grip. Basically, it's an L-shaped grip, and you can see how it looks, okay? It so closely mimics the camera itself in black. Now, I don't believe small rig makes this in any different colors, because camera actually comes in many different colors, but it is very light. It does not add much weight to it. And here's a little logo, by the way, of the small rig, okay, and it does say in the back, design for Nikon Zf. Now, another little accessory that I personally consider is very helpful if you're using this camera for street photography is actually having this little wrist strap. Now, I did talk in some other videos, actually, I'm gonna link that video in the corner up in here, where people using this little tiny red anchors. Where's mine? Here's this little tiny anchor, okay? Little red anchors where people tend to attach them to the side of the camera. However, I think it's a flaw in the design, because when you have this attached to a camera and your camera already not very ergonomically well designed for a purpose, you know, because you have a retro style camera, when you have this anchor and your strap pretty much between your hand and a camera, and it makes it harder to hold the camera. Now, one of the ideas that I personally had was to be able to attach this little anchor to the bottom of the camera and then have this wrist strap attached to the bottom, and now it's no longer between your hand and the camera, and your camera is free to hold actual grip. So guys, I hope you found this video interesting, entertaining, and educational, and I hope this 16 different reasons allow you to make more educational decision whether you should be upgrading to Nikon Zf. I do personally find that having this camera in part of my camera kit is very beneficial for many reasons. One of them is not only from a photo perspective, but also from a video perspective. I do appreciate to have longer recording. I do love the fact that the camera now has this fully articulated screen. I do love the fact that has this retro style dials on top, and having all these functions in this little tiny camera, and where I can use this beautiful little tiny lens, it just makes this camera and experience with this camera is so much more enjoyable. Guys, thanks for watching this video. I hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Please give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.